Good afternoon, everyone. It's V, the Guerrilla Economist, coming to you live on another edition of Hangin' with Harley, where we have one and only Harley Schlanger, who's live with us, and he's over in Europe. Harley he's the voice of reason. He's the voice of sanctity. He's the one to calm everyone's nerves, and he's the one to put things in perspective like no one else can. So without any further ado, Harley, welcome back, man. How are you?
I'm doing fine, V. How are you?
I'm doing great. I mean, where do we begin? There's so many things that are happening right now with this big ball of yarn of this infighting, this war that's occurring within the deep state and within members of the deep state, and it's spy versus spy at this point. It seems like, Harley.
Well, I think the important thing is to step back for a moment and remind yourself, why is this happening?
Yeah.
November 8th, the American people kicked the deep state in the head. If you look at the broad scope of Trump's campaign, and I'm reading Roger Stone's book, The Making of the President 2016,
Yeah.
and he makes this point repeatedly that what Trump did is he took on all the establishment. He took on the neocons, the neoliberals, the left Democrats, the so called conservative Republicans. He took on the whole game and he destroyed it.
Yeah.
Those people are not going to forgive or forget. And
Correct.
they're going as aggressively as I've ever seen an operation run before to what I think Putin said, and he's right about this. This is a color revolution in the United States,
Yeah.
exactly as Maidan, exactly as the one in Georgia, the so-called Arab Spring,
Right.
where you have young people who really don't know their ass from their elbow, allowing themselves to be used as pawns in this deep state operation. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I'll just tell you, I routinely peruse the so-called progressive websites.
Sure.
And, in the past, they were really quite good in going after Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
But after the election, they are now 100% CIA, NSA news nonstop.
Hmm.
And people who used to know that you can't trust the CIA, the NSA. I mean, it's not as though the Clapper story is ancient history. It just happened when he lied before the Congress. And yet, this story has been made as though it's the gospel. The Russians interfered in the election. The Russians are doing this, they're doing that. It's interesting. I heard the head of the Carnegie Institute in Moscow spoke here in Berlin yesterday, Dmitry Trenin,
Hmm.
and he said a lot of things. But one of the most interesting was, what an insult to the American people for someone to say that Russia today could switch the outcome of the election.
Yeah.
And he said,
Exactly.
as though the American people have no recognition of their own as to what was wrong with Hillary Clinton.
Right.
So I think the good news is that in spite of the efforts to derail the moves toward breaking with the transatlantic system and moving toward an alliance with Russia and possibly even China, Trump is continuing. He's not pulling back. Today, you had the meeting in Bonn of Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, with Tillerson.
Yeah.
And they basically said, we're working together on a number of key issues. Uh, Trump had the discussion last weekend with Xi Jinping, and then the meetings with Abe. The old geopolitical games are being tossed out the window. Uh, Yesterday, Trump talked with President Buhari of Nigeria, and he said, we're going to cooperate against Boko Haram. Now, that's an important indication that changes have taken place at the top. So I think that with all, if you live in the United States and all you see is CNN, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, New York Times, Washington Post, you can get thrown for a loop to think that everyone's turned on the White House and the
Correct.
White House is under siege and under in a state of chaos. But the fact is, they're continuing to move in the direction that Trump said he was going to move.
Hmm.
And so far, they haven't been thrown off. Now, that's not to say that this isn't a serious threat
Mm.
that they're going to pull off a coup.
Hmm.
But at least up to this point, the direction is continuing in the way that it has to go, which is to break with the policies of George W. Bush, Obama, and Hillary Clinton.
Right. Right. Exactly correct. It's quite amazing, man. I mean, everything from Obama not leaving Washington D.C. This is a guy who everybody thought was going to go and live in Hawaii or buy a bigger house in Chicago, but yet he seemed to have set up a shadow White House. He has over 30,000 members organized in his ridiculous simp parade that he has going, and they're doing everything they can to fight against this. And I think there's a lot going on here, especially with the the resignation of Michael Flynn, who was hot on the heels of this whole Iranian deal, as well as other things that are related to child trafficking.
Well, I think if you look at the question of Flynn, his most important role for Trump was to keep a close watch on the potential for U.S.-Russian cooperation against terrorists.
Mm.
That was how Flynn first came to public attention when he was fired by Clapper, because he said the Libyan operation was a fraud. It was no good. And it was designed to transship weapons to the terrorists in Iraq and Syria.
Yeah.
And Flynn's main responsibility was to pull together that anti-terror alliance. So, whatever else he was involved in, I mean, why is it that if you talk to the Russians now, you're somehow guilty of treason against the United States?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I think as Trump said, it's a shame that this had to happen. And Trump actually said the real scandal is these leaks of classified information that are being given out by, is it the CIA? Is it State Department? But Trump said this is criminal activity. And I think that's very important to keep in mind, that there's a criminal enterprise designed to sabotage the efforts to achieve a collaboration with Russia to fight terrorism.
Yeah.
So that's the highest aspect of the cooperation between the United States and Russia. And that's what's being sabotaged by this neocon Obama Hillary Clinton alliance.
Right.
Now, I want to just bring up one other thing that came up from Germany today.
Mm-hmm.
Jens Wiedmann, who's the president of the Bundesbank, the equivalent of the Federal Reserve for Germany, essentially gave a statement in which he said there could be a financial crash as a result of Trump tinkering with Dodd-Frank. Now, this is one of the more aggressive statements against Trump on the economy. You see it, the Economist had a whole series of articles last week on how Trump is weakening regulation. I mean, he's not weakening regulation. He's throwing out a piece of crap bill called Dodd-Frank.
Correct.
Which was designed to allow the swindle to continue.
Yes.
So I think he made a mistake in what he targeted as his first step, because I think he should just say we're getting rid of the whole thing. But you can see from Wiedmann's statement and similar statements in The Economist and the Financial Times, the Rothschild publications, that what they're saying is that they're going to pull the plug and blame it on Trump.
Yeah.
So if they can't get him on the Russia question, they'll go after him by bringing the economy down and blaming him.
Right. Absolutely correct, man. It's pretty laughable that they're making all sorts of crazy assertions that Trump is going to bring about the end of the world. Well, it's going to be the end of their world, Harley.
Well, it will be, and the part that the other thing to look at is, if you look at the reports in Europe as well, there's a panic developing over the Greek debt.
Yes.
The IMF again reported that it's unsustainable. Well, it's always been unsustainable because it was based on a Goldman Sachs fraud that was done to bring Greece into the Eurozone. And the latest reports are that the European Central Bank and the Germans are meeting to discuss whether or not to do another bailout for Greece. Now, the only reason to do another bailout for Greece is that it's the banks that are going to collapse, not Greece. Greece has already collapsed. Greece has been thoroughly destroyed by the austerity regime, but they're continuing to keep them alive. It's sort of like when your grandmother dies, but you don't tell the social security system so you can keep getting her checks.
Yeah.
Greece has been killed as an economy, but they're using it as a pass-through to Deutsche Bank, BNP Paribas, Royal Bank of Scotland, and so on. And so what Draghi is saying is that quantitative easing will continue now through some part in 2018. So they keep pushing it back because they don't know what else to do.
Hmm.
But it's not just Greece, it is Spain, it is Italy, and it is the French and German banking system that are also facing annihilation if they continue with this policy.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Um, what do you think is I mean you talked about the meeting with Lavrov and Tillerson. What do you think the broader scope of the cooperation right now is with Russia and the United States? I mean, there's so much hysteria. There's so many of these so-called intelligence community. One of which said that Trump's going to die in jail. I mean, this is
Yeah,
incredible,
I
Harley.
saw that one. But look, when you talk about the intelligence community, Eisenhower, when he warned about the military-industrial complex, was not just talking about arms manufacturers. That's a
Sure.
part of it. But what has grown up, especially since the George W. Bush administration,
Mm,
is the consultancies, the mercenary forces. There's a huge business in Northern Virginia now that's part of the war business. And again, it's not just arms, it's people who provide supplies, people who are supposedly building democracy in Iraq,
yeah.
which is a fraud. All they're doing is stealing the American people blind.
Hmm.
And so I think you've got that grouping, and then you've got the military. And the military, to some extent, some of the military people are pulled into that because they see it as a great retirement. They can join one of these consultancy firms and make a fortune. But people like General Dempsey, the former head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mattis seems to be of the same type. John Kelly, the Homeland Security Chief, the same type. They actually care about what the real military responsibility is to protect and secure the United States. And they disagree with the Rumsfeld Wolfowitz doctrine that the purpose of the military is to assert U.S. supremacy over all nations.
Right.
They think that's an absolutely insane idea. We're not an empire. And so you're seeing now military cooperation with Russia. I mentioned earlier General Dunford, the current Joint Chief of Staff Chairman, is meeting with the Chief of the General Staff of the Russian Army, Gerasimov.
Yeah.
They're meeting today. One of the things that came out of the Lavrov Tillerson meeting was the Russians invited the United States to join the Astana process. That's Astana is the city where meetings are taking place between Turkey, Russia, Iran, and Syria
Hmm.
to plan the not just the defeat of the terrorists, but the rebuilding of the region. And Tillerson said that he would bring that back to Trump and take it up with him. If the US were to go beyond just rhetoric and actually join something like that and continue to move beyond deconfliction, in other words, not just shooting down each other's aircraft, to avoid that in Syria, but actually coordinating the targeting and the activity. And to some extent, that's already started. Then you could circle around the deep state types, but you've got to get rid of them. I mean, this is
Yeah.
the real issue here. As long as these guys have a say in policy, they're going to pursue a policy that's against the interests of the United States people. And so I think the important thing that could come out of what Trump is doing, and this is why the oligarchy is so freaked out, is he could say, we don't need you, the same way he did with political consultants and the people who run elections. We don't need you. We're going to run this differently.
Yeah.
That's why they're so hysterical. It's some of them, it is a matter of ideological commitment. Others, it's pure corruption.
Absolutely.
So if you
Absolutely.
pull the plug on that, you put them out of the gravy train stops.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. 1000%, man. And it needs to be done. Do you think that Trump needs to move more aggressively? I know there's a lot of hysteria by, of course, the mainstream, but also the alt media. Everybody's getting nervous. Everybody's like, "Oh my God, is the end of the dream? Is the dream over? Are they neutering Trump? Are they trying to control him? Is it over?"
Oh, of course, they're trying to control them. Everything they've done since November 8th has been to marginalize and delegitimize Trump.
Right.
And in this case, it's a bigger question than Trump. It really is whether the U.S. as a constitutional republic will survive.
Sure.
And that's what the real fight is. And to answer your question, yes, he should move much more aggressively. One of the things he could do, we're coming up on the anniversary, the third anniversary of the coup in Ukraine. One of the things he could do is release the documents on how the neocons ran a coup in Ukraine where they put Nazi forces inside the Ukrainian defense ministry and security forces. Why the Russians reacted as they did. Because the whole point on sanctions
Yeah.
is that the sanctions were imposed because the Russians responded to a coup on their border in which real live Nazis were put in the government. So he could do that.
Yeah.
I think he is. I think the meeting with Abe from Japan was very promising, especially. Look, the Japanese and the Chinese are now competing to see who can put more money into rebuilding U.S. infrastructure. If Trump actually keeps that going, that's a great benefit to the United States.
Oh, absolutely.
So, but the other thing he's got to do is go with Glass-Steagall. He's got to take the power away from Wall Street. And Glass-Steagall is not the hydrogen bomb for financial problems, but it does go a long way to breaking the power of those people who are behind the attacks on Trump.
Yeah.
So I would say pursue the Russian rapprochement. Don't listen to the mice that are barking. Pursue it aggressively, but go with Glass-Steagall as quickly as possible. And in this case, he could also bring the Democrats into an alliance with him. Instead of having the Democrats sitting there cheerleading his collapse. And by the way, I don't think Trump is collapsing. The idea that his administration is in turmoil, he goes to work every day. They're doing things. What's
Mhm.
in turmoil is the stomachs of the neocons and the existing so-called elites, because they do see that the game is up.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Exactly. The jig is up, and then you have guys who are, quote unquote, intelligence individuals coming out saying that Trump should, he's going to die in jail. And this is the same guy who's been, fired from the DOD because he was, sending pics of his genitalia on Twitter. So this is the kind of people we're dealing with, Harley.
We are talking about a corrupt bunch of degenerates who
Yes.
think that they are superior. You
Correct.
look at Hillary, who had an arrogance toward the population.
Oh
And
yeah.
the reason Trump has support from the population is that the American people reacted against that arrogance. Now, on the East Coast and the West Coast, you have a lot of people who are those types of arrogant people who think that because they chose to live in California, they're better than the rest of the population.
Yeah, because it's a wonderful state over there.
Yeah, it's falling apart.
Yeah.
So, and you can't cheerlead that either. I mean, what we need is to get the Chinese in there to build some high-speed rail connecting California with Vladivostok and revive the California economy. Remember, California was not always just Hollywood. In World War II, while everyone talks about Detroit as the arsenal of democracy, the second largest military supplier was the Los Angeles area
Yes.
with aerospace, shipbuilding, the auto sector in that area, also up in the Bay Area of San Francisco. All that's been dismantled.
Right.
So that's why you have the fruitcakes and Governor Moonbeam and people like that as
Governor
leaders
Moonbeam.
out there. And remember, Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor for a while out there. So, but I think that this is where what Mr. Lurch keeps stressing is that the American people have an intuition when it comes to leaders. They may
Yes.
not know what they need, but they know what they don't like.
Correct.
And what they
Correct.
like about Trump is that he hates the media and he won't allow himself to be bullied by these Washington insiders.
Right.
And people respect that. So I think he has to be more aggressive against these types.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you totally, man. I think the way I liken this is it's like a prison drama. Okay, the first thing when the new boss has come into the prison, he's in the pen. The first thing that he has to do is he has to shank someone, Harley. And I think Trump has to shank someone here in order to set an example to all the other inmates that he is not to be messed with. Now the question is, with Flynn being gone, with all these things happening, we know Priebus is probably one of the leakers. We know that. Okay, he's on the chopping block. Trump is playing his cards. He's like Putin in this regard. He's not going to react. He's going to respond.
That's right. And look, the fact that that Trump has an admiration for Putin is a good thing
Yes.
because Putin is one of the most rational players on the world scene.
Yes, he is.
He's very clever in figuring out how to outflank his adversaries, as
Correct.
he did with Obama repeatedly. He outflanked Obama so much that Obama's underwear was in knots. Didn't know whether he was coming or going. You think about the Syrian chemical weapons situation. You look at what Russia did. The argument that Russia is causing the refugee crisis in Europe, that Russia's out to destroy the EU. Russia doesn't want the EU destroyed. They want the EU as a trading partner.
Yeah, exactly.
They also know that the EU is destroying itself. They don't need Putin to destroy them, just as Putin couldn't destroy the United States any better than Obama was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely correct.
But if people get this sense that without the great hero and the great thinker and the savior of the country, he does have a gut sense of the need to fight these globalist elites. I think they're still smarting from the fact that the first thing he did when he came into office was to end the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah.
That was a huge blow. And, in his discussions with Abe, the Japanese press were trying to turn Abe against Trump over that. And Abe just said, look, we're going to trade with the United States. We didn't need the Trans-Pacific Partnership to have a lot of trade with the United States.
Yeah.
So these things can be worked out. And instead of getting panicked by every day when I look at the Washington Post, I just laugh at their stories. Trump administration in crisis. Trump administration breaking down. This is the third day after Trump's been in power.
Yeah.
So they're trying to create something. And I think that if people keep a focus on the broader strategic issues, we can win this fight. But don't get, as you say, that like Putin, don't get provoked
Yeah.
by every little insult that comes from this establishment. They're finished. One of the things LaRouche said the other day, I was telling him that one of my contacts in Washington said the sharks are circling. And Lynn said, yeah, but the sharks are toothless.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. The sharks they are toothless and they're hurting.
Yeah.
And they're hurting.
Yep. That's right.
That's perfect.
Keep an eye on this Greek situation. That's the latest coming from my contacts here in Europe, is that there's a panic developing because how is Schäuble, the German finance minister, going to sell another bailout to Greece? Especially when the report came out last month. I think I reported this on a previous discussion with you, that one out of every $2 in quantitative easing created by the European Central Bank ends up in City of London banks, even after Brexit.
Yeah.
Out of the first $1 trillion or trillion euros, 500 million of it ended up in British banks. So it's using countries like Greece as a pass-through. They've bought almost all the sovereign debt they could, including the non-performing debt. Now they're buying junk bonds, just like the Federal Reserve did.
Mm. Yeah, unreal, man. I don't know how they're gonna pull that stunt off. It's funny. It's like these people still have this. They're reading from the same music sheet, Harley. But the problem is nobody's attending the concert anymore.
Well, and the string players have all dropped dead.
Exactly. Very
So
well said.
no, the band played on, as they say, even when the war was over.
Yes, yes.
They're trying to keep up a sense of business as usual. Don't worry, the elites can't be defeated. That was what was disconcerting at this lecture I went to yesterday by this guy Trenin.
Yeah.
He just said, well, with Flynn gone, forget US Russian rapprochement. And when I had a chance to speak, I just said, I disagree with you completely. The people who are attacking Trump now are the people he crushed in the primary in the Republican Party and then in the general election.
Right.
I think you're overlooking the role of the American people. And then he said something interesting. He said, well, he said, Yuri Andropov once said to the Russian Soviet leadership, we don't really understand the people of Russia. He thinks that the American political leadership on the whole doesn't understand the American people. And he said Trump did. And I think that's an important point.
Correct. I agree with you wholeheartedly, man. Absolutely. Well, Harley, we're come to the end of the show. Why don't you give out your website or where people could follow your work and how they can reach out to you if they need to?
Just keep joining us on go to larouchepack.com. We've got this petition on Glass-Steagall that we're circulating, and we've gotten thousands of signatures on it. There is a Glass-Steagall bill before the Congress now. Marcy Kaptur and a handful, I guess 27 other co-sponsors introduced it. But LaRouchePack.com is the best place to go if you want to follow these stories that we're talking about.
Fantastic. Harley Schlanger, thank you so much for joining us. And folks, you've been listening to another Hang In with Harley. I'll be back here next week as Harley, breaks down even more information for us because I'm without a doubt know that there'll be a lot more things to discuss. Thank you all for listening in. Have a wonderful day and a great weekend.